Let's talk about how to create a menu bar as well as having submenus and sub items within them. All right, so there's going to be two different ways that we can go about doing this. Now, as you can see here, they look exactly the same, so it doesn't really matter. It's going to come down to your own personal preference and possibly your use case. Now, the easiest or the least amount of nodes ways of doing this would be this one here, which is simply just adding a menu button itself to your scene. And if you want to have that dark background look, then you have to turn the flat option in the inspector off. It'll be on by default, so it'll look like this. But odds are, unless you're making a custom colored bar in the background, you're probably going to have flat off just so you can see it better, just in general. And just with that, without having anything here, you can kind of see the menu bar pop up there, or the actual pop up menu from the menu button pop up, but there's nothing in it, so it's just this tiny little gray box. And you can see with these, in the other option, they also automatically show up for us. Now, by default, I do have options added in there, and the benefit of doing it this way, this second way over here, is you have a menu bar node type, and inside of that, you actually put in pop-up menus instead of menu buttons. Now, since you're putting a pop-up menu in here, you can actually add the items, right, the drop-down bar items, into your, or through the inspector. So if you're more of a visual person, that might be a better option for you. So if I open that up, or at least make it visible, you can see it there, as well as you can have the option of making things checkable, right? So we can do like a checkbox, or you can add the radio button if you preferred. You can also add icons. You can obviously use it as a separator, so if you want to have categories within your drop downs, you can do that. And of course, you can always disable an option. And that's all you can do in the inspector. So if you want to get into sub menus, then you're going to have no choice but to go into the code. But for now, that's what you can go ahead on. And the benefit that you have with the if you go the menu bar route here, is when you add a pop-up menu, it automatically creates the menu button here that you see automatically for you. And if you were to maybe in the future add in more items, more menu buttons to click on, then for example, as you can see here, the menu bar is going to automatically expand to accommodate this. And of course, if in this case they're all kind of the same, but they all of course have their own menu system set up there. So it's going to go ahead and delete all those clones. So that's the main difference. With the menu bar, it's going to automatically expand if you add more, and you just got to put a pop-up menu in as a child of it, and it will automatically expand to the needed width. And you can add basic items in the inspector. With the menu button, you automatically get the pop-up when you create the button, but you're going to have to add your items through code, whether they're basic items or more advanced items. Alright, so now to show you how to go about doing this, I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and use the which one do we want to go with? Let's go with the menu bar first. So with the menu bar, I'm going to use the file option here as my demo. So in my file pop-up, as you see, I just made it visible just so we can see it. In the item section in the inspector, I have created an item called new, and I've created an item called quit, just so that we're all on the same page here. Now I'm going to go ahead and hide that again because I don't need that to be showing immediately. And we're going to go ahead and go into our code. Now I'm going to come in here, and inside of, I have a a variable here, export, just so I can grab a hold of my file menu easily. And you might have noticed that I set that in the inspector already. I just brought it on over. Alright, so I'm gonna go file menu, and we can do .add underscore item, and this is going to give us a basic item. We can do the icon item, we can do icon and it's a checkbox, icon with the radio check, just a check item, and then we can go into the submenu multi-state radio check and all that as well. So the basic item, you're just going to say add item, add a string, and say this is my new item. And if we were to go ahead and run that, we can take a look at that file. That up, and we see the new option is put in there. All right. Now, you got a similar option if you were to go with the checkbox and so on, right? So if we say, hey, add a check item, and then we could just add check item right in there, and we don't have to have any other option specified in there by default. Whoops, my mistake. But if we want, we could come in there, we give it an index, and then you see we can put a key in there. But the index is if you want to specify where it is in that pop-up menu list. Now, of course, if you don't specify, it's -1 as default, as you would have saw from the hint that popped up there. And that's basically just going to put it at the bottom of our list every time. So if I were to run that, take a look, open, there it is, and it's a check item. Right there. Now, obviously, it's not going to activate here because you would need to go into the code. More of that for when you select an item. But for now, we'll just go ahead and I'll revert that. And we'll just set that back to, this is my new item. Now, what if you wanted to create a menu that, a sub menu, right? So an item that has a little arrow, you go inside of it and it has its own menu. Well, you might come over here and you grab your file menu and you say, hey, add sub menu item. Okay, we got to give it a label. Okay, so let's say sub menu item, and then we have to have a sub menu in the form of a string. So let's put, we'll just put in sub menu there, and the last option again is just going to be the index, so that's fine. But if we come in here, we can see, okay, we have it, we have the arrow, but no menu actually appears for that. And the reason for that is we actually have to create the sub menu ourselves. So at the top, I'm just going to say var, right? Create a variable. I'm just going to call it submenu1. This is a pop-up menu type. It's going to be a pop-up menu.new. Now, what I'm going to do here is this submenu, we're going to need a name of it. Because what this is going to do is it's going to get the, you're going to use a pop-up menu that is a child of the one you're using. So in my case, we're using the file menu, right? Correct? So we're going to look inside the file menu. And the reason why we're coming up with nothing is because this submenu that we typed in here as a string, this name, the file menu is looking for a child that has that name. And that's what it's trying to use, which we don't have. So I'm going to say submenu1.name. So I'm going to give it a name. And I'm just going to call it submenu so that it fits with what we had typed down here. So this should be equals. And if we were to run that, and we take a look, we can see nothing actually shows up. Well, our menu actually isn't in our scene yet either. And remember what I said, it had to be a child, or the file menu is looking at its children for this name. So we need to go to our file menu and add it as a child of that. Add child, submenu1, right? Put that in. And now what if we try it? What do we get? Oh, well, we have the menu popping up, but there's nothing in it. We see this tiny little box here. Okay, so now our menu is actually showing up. So there's our minimum requirement. We're going to give our submenu a name, and we're going to add it as a child to the menu it's going to be branching off of. Right? So now I can come in here and I can say submenu1.add item, and I'll give this a name, and I'll call this my new sub item. So now when we run it, we're going to see not only is it going to pop up, but we're going to have this option in here now. And if you want to create an additional sub menu on that, it would be the same thing. You would get this sub menu item, right, which we already have here is listed as sub menu 1, and we will add the next pop-up to that. Right, so as a quick example, I went ahead, I just created a new sub menu variable here for a new pop-up. I gave it a name, submenu 2. I added it as a child to submenu 1. Submenu 2, I added a new item to it called the newer item. And then I took submenu 1 and I added a submenu item. And I just called it the subber menu and used submenu 2 because that's the name that we gave it. So if you were to run that, we can then take a look and we can come in. We have one menu there. We have a second menu there. And we can continue making as many of these menus popping out as we wanted. That's how you create these items. Now, let's quickly go ahead and take the same principle and apply it to a menu button. Right? Just our basic menu button here. So by default, we're already able to add in a new item, right? So we'll say self. So you might come in and say self.add item, but you're going to end up getting an error, and that's because we actually have to get the pop-up for ourselves. Our own pop-up menu. So we'll say var, and we'll say, well, I just have it called as menu button in this case. So I'll just say menu pop-up, and that's going to be a pop-up menu type. That'll be equal to self.get pop-up. I do believe it is called here. And that should allow us to do our menu pop-up.add item, my new item. We run that, open it, there we go. So we were able to get our pop-up menu just fine. And we added an item to it. So the majority of what we're doing here is going to be the same. So if I want to add some submenus, I'm going to create my variables for these. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing we did in the previous option here, giving our submenu a name and adding it as a child. The first submenu item is going to be a child to our menu pop-up, and submenu 2 is going to be a child of submenu 1. And of course, we run that right now, we're not going to get anything because we haven't actually added any sub items. So if we go ahead and add those next, so if we go ahead and add that next, just like we did in the previous one, we go ahead and take a look and run, and you can see we have the same setup. So the only difference code-wise is if you're doing the menu button, you're going to have to add in all your new items by hand. And you're going to have to get the pop-up for your menu button using self.get pop-up. Whereas if you're using the menu bar and just adding a pop-up as a child of it, you can code directly to that pop-up without having to do this extra step of having to get it. Now, of course, since I used the export, we're still technically getting that pop-up menu, so it's really kind of the same thing, with the only main difference being adding items. So whichever route you want to go with setting that up or that you want to use is going to be completely up to you. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've added this add check item called check me, and I've added that to both of our options here. And I'm going to show you how to both make an item checkable, right? Because right now when we click it, nothing happens. So I'm going to show you how to tweak that when it gets selected, as well as have whatever it is you want happen when you click on the item. So to go about this, I'm going to go ahead and start with the menu bar, just because it already has the pop-up, so it's going to be easier to connect things that way. So we're just going to go into our signals in the node tab, and we can take a look at ID pressed, or we can take a look at the index pressed. Really, it's up to you on which of these you want to go by. I'm going to use index pressed just because I believe for the checkboxes we're passing an index, not an ID. So I'm going to connect the index pressed signal to my menu bar. And this is specifically to my file pop-up, right? So I can now come in here and I could say, we can then come in here and use a match, right? So we can say match index. And we say, oh, if it's 0, do this. If it's 1, do this, and so on, right? I don't know how many items we have in here into our submenu, but I'm going to come in here and take a look right now. So in here we have 0 for new, quit for 1, and check me is going to be 2. So we at least need to get down to 2. All right, so I'll go ahead and I'll put 2 in there. So we have 3 options. Now what I'm going to do here is we can go ahead and get the item text. All right, so if I just go into my file menu, we say get item, and we can see the accelerator icon, ID, modulate, index, language, metadata, submenu, text, whatever it is that we want to get with that. So we're using the index, so I'm going to use that to get the text, and you can see we're going to pass an index in. Now I'm just going to put 0. This is kind of hard coding it. You could just type in index if you want to go that route. It's fine, because if it matches 0, then we must be putting 0 in anyway. And if you want, you can go ahead and print that out. And I'll do that for all 3 of these. And we take a look. File, click on new, and it prints out new inside of our console, prints out quit, and it prints out our check me. Now, check me is 2. So how do we actually set this? Well, we're obviously not going to print it here. What we're going to do is we're going to use our file menu. And we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to say, no, we don't want to add a check item. What we want to do is we want to set an item as checkable. No, set item checked. That's what we're looking for. And we know that index is 2. You can hard code it with a 2, or you can just type in index. And we're getting yelled at because we need a second option. And that second option is going to be a bool. So in my case, I'm going to say true. And now when I run that, I can take a look. I click on it, and now it's true. And obviously, if I click on it again, it's going to stay true. So we need to have some kind of swap happening here. So we're going to say, let's go ahead and do, let's call it, let's see, it doesn't really matter. Why am I stressing over this? Let's call it check. This is a bool, and by default, this is false. Right, so we're going to create a variable called check. It's a boolean, and I'm not tabbed in. There we go. So we're going to say file menu dot is item checked. Pass in our index, of course, so that's going to give us either a true or a false. And we're just going to say check equals not check. I always get this confused on if it's not check equals check, check not equals check, or check equals not check. I always get this confused, but if I did this right, I should just be able to pass this option in now, and we should be able to toggle back and forth. Let's see, click and it's on, click again and it's off. So there you go. So now we have this checkable option working just as intended. And now at any point, you could go in and access that menu and use is item checked, like you see here, and find out if it is checked, and if so, adjust your options or whatever it is you're doing accordingly. Now, likewise, this is going to be pretty well the same thing over on our menu button. Now, the difference is we're actually going to have to connect our signal through code since we don't have access to this in the inspector at all. So we would have to get our menu pop-up dot connect. We want to connect the signal name, which I can see on the side there is index pressed. And it's going to be a callable connected to myself. And I'll just call this on, that's one, on menu index press, right? We'll just kind of stick with that theme there. And now you'll see it come down, func, boom, pass that in. Remember, it takes an index as an argument. This is an int by default. And I can go ahead and hit pass on that. Now, what we can do is we can do this exact same thing here using this match. Just bring that down. Obviously, file menu isn't what we're looking for there, so I can just go ahead and replace file menu with our menu pop-up. Now, I'm not sure what the index is here, so I'm going to have to take a look. And I'm looking for index 1 in this case. But if I click on new item, oh, it is not popping up there. Why is that? Curious. I just had a typo in there. There we go. I can go ahead and click on my items and it works. And it's not going to work when I click on this option because it's a sub menu. So we can come in here and our sub menu is actually going to be in 1 in this case. So I'll just delete that option out. Alright, so now we can take a look and this should work just as it did on the other menu. Alright, so those are the differences between using the menu bar and just adding pop-ups and using a menu button. So to go over those differences again, if you're using a menu button, you're going to have to add all your items through code, as well as connect your signal through code if you're going to have anything to be checkable. And you're going to have to get the pop-up in some way, either by constantly calling get pop-up every time you need it, or assigning it to a variable. And if you're using the menu bar, we can use an export to get each of our base menu pop-ups, since the actual menu button is generated for us just by putting a pop-up menu inside of a menu bar. And the benefit we have here is every time you add a new pop-up menu into the menu bar as a child, the menu button is automatically created for you, and it will automatically extend its width of the menu bar as it is needed. And you can add items through the inspector, so if you're more of a visual person, you can do it that way. And since the pop-up menus are directly inside of your scene, you can connect your signals visually. However, you're still going to need to create your submenus in code and your submenu items in code. Alright, so that'll do it for showing you guys how to create these menu bars. And this will be handy if you want to create yourself a tool or a piece of software using the engine, or maybe you want to make one of those games that are out there where you're kind of emulating a desktop environment, or one of those, what is it called? Emily is Away, I think, was one of them, where you're kind of emulating a chat messenger service. But anyways, there you go. That's how those are your 2 different ways for really creating menus with the built-in nodes. take care. I'll see you guys next time. If you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So I guess it'll be next week.